Did you know that one mistake could cost millions of lives? In this story, the USA decided the fate of the war in just a few days. If you're interested in the truth about World War II, subscribe and hit the like button. There are many shocking facts ahead. Imagine this: the sun blazing over the endless Pacific, the sea a glimmering sheet of blue steel. Out of that shimmering horizon roars a shape, a twin-engine aircraft hurtling just above the waves, so low that the spray lashes its belly. It's a bomber, but not the kind you expect. Not one of those high-flying giants that release their bombs from the safety of the clouds. No, this one prowls at mast height, its nose flashing with gunfire. Now, place yourself on the deck of a Japanese cargo ship in 1943. You glance up, squinting into the glare, thinking you've seen this before. A B-25 Mitchell, perhaps. Another bomber, too high to do real harm. You breathe easier for a heartbeat. After all, bombers drop their payloads from thousands of feet up, don't they? There's time to steer clear, time to live. Then you notice something wrong. The nose of this Mitchell isn't transparent. It's solid, and it's spitting flame. In that instant, realization dawns, far too late. 8 heavy machine guns rake the bridge, shredding steel and glass, tearing through men and machinery alike. And before the echoes of gunfire fade, the bomber's next move seals your fate. Its bombs skip across the water like stones, slamming straight into the hull with a deafening final roar. This was the terror of the Strafer B-25, a transformation so radical it rewrote the rules of aerial combat. A bomber reborn as a sea-skimming predator, turning Japan's merchant fleet into a collection of floating targets. The fire that consumed ships across the Pacific spelled out a single truth: American ingenuity had found a new way to wage war. But how did this metamorphosis happen? How did a standard medium bomber, built for high-altitude missions, become a ship-killing monster? The answer lies in the vision and sheer stubbornness of one man, Major Paul Pappy Gunn, a name whispered with both reverence and disbelief among his peers. He wasn't an officer born of academies or bureaucracy. Far from it. When war erupted at Pearl Harbor, Pappy Gunn wasn't even supposed to be in combat. He was a civilian contractor, a former Navy pilot turned commercial flyer in the Philippines. Yet it was this maverick, tinkering in the heat and dust of rough airstrips in Australia and New Guinea, who reshaped the way America fought in the Pacific. Before Pappy's revolution, the North American B-25 Mitchell, named for General Billy Mitchell, the fiery prophet of air power, had been a dependable workhorse. It entered service in 1941 as a solid, adaptable bomber, well-suited for traditional missions. Climb high, release your bombs, and head home. Its reputation soared after April 1942, when 16 of these planes thundered off the deck of the USS Hornet on the legendary Doolittle raid, striking Tokyo and proving that America could reach the Japanese homeland. Yet, as the months wore on, the limitations of such conventional tactics became painfully clear. The Pacific was vast, an oceanic chessboard where the enemy's lifelines were the slow, vital convoys feeding Japan's war machine, high-altitude bombing against those moving targets, a nightmare of mathematics and missed opportunities, wind drift, ship speed, altitude. Too many variables, too much room for error. Bombs released from 20,000 feet, splashed uselessly into the sea, while Japanese supply lines continued to pulse with life. By late 1942, the Allies faced a cruel question: how do you cripple an enemy's logistics when your bombers can't reliably hit a ship? The answer would not come from polished conference tables in Washington, nor from design bureaus drafting neat blueprints. It would rise instead from the mud and sweat of the front lines, from one restless, defiant man who refused to accept that standard procedure meant best. And so begins the story of how Major Paul Pappy Gunn, a pilot, a mechanic, and a visionary with grease-stained hands, turned the B-25 Mitchell into something entirely new, something the Japanese would learn to fear every time they dared to sail under the Pacific sun. When the Japanese swept into the Philippines, Paul Gunn felt the world close like a fist. His wife and children were left behind in Manila. Evacuation slipped through his fingers. He watched them taken and interned, powerless as orders and iron moved around the people he loved. Can you imagine that hollowing pain, seeing your family disappear behind an enemy line while you have nowhere to put them? That personal wound burned into him and became the fuel for an obsession: make the enemy pay for every life he'd lost to their advance. Gunn's story does not begin on the Pacific front, but in the open spaces of early American aviation. Born in Arkansas in 1899, he came of age when flying was still closer to spectacle than science. In 1917, he joined the Navy, learned to fly, and fell for aircraft with the kind of total devotion sailors feel for the sea otter enduring absolute. After his naval service, he hopped between flying jobs, barnstorming under big tents, hauling passengers and cargo on commercial runs, until he found himself running air transport operations in the Philippines. By December 7, 1941, Gunn was in his 40s by any standard, past the conventional age for combat pilots. Yet when war erupted, convention mattered less than conviction. As Japanese forces overran the islands, Gunn flew evacuation and ferry missions through chaos, moving people and supplies where he could. But his family couldn't be evacuated. That failure, the image of the woman he loved and his children swallowed by the enemy, solidified his resolve. He would not go home. He would not sit out this war. He vowed instead to hunt the lines that fed Japan's war machine and to exact a terrible, measured toll for every ship and ton of supplies that crossed his ocean. There was a practical obstacle. The Allied aircraft available in 1942-43 were not built for what Gunn intended. Heavy bombers like the B-17 were precious and exposed at low levels. Fighters lacked sufficient ordnance for the job. Medium bombers, such as the B-25, were optimized for high-altitude runs. Precisely the doctrine Gunn had learned was failing against moving ships. So he began to tinker where the technical manuals did not reach. In crude maintenance pits and jury-rigged sheds across Australia and New Guinea, Gunn set about reshaping the B-25 in ways that would have made factory engineers blanch. He gutted the bombardier's glass nose, the delicate sights, the plexiglass, the whole precision apparatus, and replaced it with blunt force. Guns. 4 50-caliber machine guns became 6, then 8. Gun blisters sprouted along fuselage sides. He even trialed mounting a 75mm cannon. The airframe that emerged looked like an iron porcupine, an aircraft not meant to loiter high and safe, but to fly at the enemy, to stare a ship in the eye and shred it with concentrated fire. Yet Gunn's brilliance went beyond bolting weapons to metal. He reimagined how air power itself should be used against ships. Alongside pilots such as Major Edward Larner, he refined a daring technique skip bombing, releasing bombs at hair-raisingly low altitudes, often around 200 feet, so they would ricochet across the water like flat stones and slam into a vessel's hull at or below the waterline. Paired with the brutal nose-mounted strafing that mowed down gun crews and smashed command bridges, this was a lethal 1-2. Strip away a ship's defensive capacity, then deliver a bomb at point-blank range where it would do the most structural damage. What did this mean for doctrine? It forced a rethink. Traditional air doctrine prized height, precision, and standoff deliver ordnance from afar, and let technology and altitude keep you safe. That model had worked over Europe, where targets were large, static, and mappable. But the Pacific was different, moving, dispersed, and unforgiving. Gun strafers brought combat up close into the kind of hand-to-hand aerial engagements the old manuals had never envisioned. Pilots skimmed waves so close that spray flecked their windscreens. They flew straight at ships, absorbing return fire while their nose guns systematically erased the enemy's will and capability to fight. By the time the strafer swept over a target, the vessel was often already mortally wounded. Then the skip bombs finished the job with brutal accuracy from almost point-blank range. In short, Gunn did not merely modify aircraft. He rewired strategy. He turned the B-25 from a medium-altitude bomber into a close combat, ship-killing machine. And in doing so, he changed the face of aerial warfare in the Pacific. Close your eyes for a moment and picture the old rules of war being torn up in broad daylight. Bombers were meant to be cathedral-like platforms, protected, prized, flown from above where flak and rifles could not touch them. Now imagine those same machines driven deliberately into the teeth of defensive fire. What happens when doctrine collides with necessity? That collision was exactly what the Strafer B-25 forced upon the Pacific. The traditional idea held that medium and heavy bombers were assets to be sheltered, a precious class of aircraft shepherded well above the reach of light anti-aircraft guns and small arms. Gunn's tactics flung that orthodoxy out the window. By flying low, by staring straight into the enemy's eyeballs, Strafer crews converted altitude into a liability and proximity into lethal advantage. Japanese gunners, trained to mark silhouettes at thousands of feet, suddenly had attackers at eye level streaking toward them at terrifying speed. How quickly could they react? How accurately could they aim? Minutes shrank to heartbeats. The time to find the range, to track, to aim and fire effectively collapsed. But the change was not merely temporal, it was also intellectual. High-altitude bombing depended on intelligence that was often stale reports hours or days old. In contrast, a Strafer pilot arriving over a convoy could literally see the ledger of value laid out before him. Which ships carried fuel, which cradled ammunition, which nested troops. Which target would you choose if you could pick with your own eyes? The tanker, the ammunition ship, the troop transport? This was not area bombardment. This was surgical, almost personal assassination at sea. The proof came in blood and sinking steel. Repeatedly through 1943 and 1944, these tactics paid off. Most starkly, in March 1943, during the Battle of the Bismarck Sea, modified B-25s helped annihilate a Japanese convoy bound for New Guinea. 8 transports and 4 destroyers were sent to the bottom, and thousands of Japanese soldiers drowned as the supplies they carried never reached shore. The lesson for the Japanese Navy was brutal and undeniable. Daylight convoys under Allied air supremacy were tantamount to suicide. What made the Strafer solution so revolutionary was the recognition that the aircraft themselves were not the limiting factor. Their employment was. Gunn grasped the essential truth. To hit moving ships, You either demanded impossible precision from high altitude, or you adopted an entirely different method at low altitude. He chose the latter, and in doing so, he illustrated principles of military innovation that resonate beyond that war. First, operational necessity trumps doctrinal purity. Manuals, training, and engineering blueprints had defined the proper use of a medium bomber. Yet when the prescribed method failed, Gunn, driven by urgency and the loosened constraints of a theater, stretched thin, experimented where the manuals forbade. He did not wait for permission. He improvised, tested, refined, and proved his ideas in combat before headquarters could say no. Second, combined arms at the tactical level multiplies effectiveness. The Strafer was not a single miracle weapon, but an ensemble machine guns, cannons, skip bombs, and later rockets woven together into a single, coordinated assault. Any one of those systems alone might be manageable by a ship. All of them delivered together from point-blank range overwhelmed defenses. The enemy could survive a strafing run or a single bomb hit, but surviving both, delivered with ruthless timing and persistence, was another matter. Third, attack logistics and you erode an army's capacity to fight. Every Japanese soldier on every Pacific island depended on the steady trickle of food, fuel, ammunition, and spare parts delivered by sea. Each aircraft required gasoline and replacement components. Every vehicle needed fuel. By making daytime maritime supply routes lethal, Strafer B-25s forced the enemy to limp into night operations slower, less efficient, and lower in volume. The result was attrition, not of fleets and glorious fleet actions, but of logistics. Reinforcements decimated en route. Supplies that should have sustained frontline units simply not arriving. The Imperial Japanese forces were starved of the material they needed to hold ground, not because of a single decisive naval battle, but because cargo ships were destroyed, convoy by convoy. The broader insight is clear. Innovation often looks like heresy until it works. Gunn's tactics were brutal, intimate, and ugly close-in combat where men and metal met in a confined, violent geometry, but they were effective. They forced a rethink of how air power could be applied against mobile maritime targets and, in doing so, changed the strategic map of the Pacific, one sinking at a time. Innovation rarely begins in marble halls or polished briefing rooms. It often rises from the edges, from people close enough to the problem to feel it, yet far enough from institutional authority to question the sacred rules. Paul Pappy Gunn was no general, no staff theorist, surrounded by aides and paperwork. He was a pilot and a mechanic, a man with oil on his hands and grief in his heart, who looked at what was failing and refused to accept it. His solutions weren't elegant. They weren't the products of committees or studies. They were raw, improvised, and brutally effective. But any honest telling of this story must also face its shadow. The Strafer B-25 was an instrument of annihilation. When these modified bombers tore into Japanese convoys, their 50 caliber guns did not discriminate. They killed sailors and soldiers alike, many of them civilians or conscripted workers simply trapped aboard the wrong ship at the wrong time. The moral logic of total war insists such destruction was justified, cripple the enemy's lifelines, shorten the war, save Allied lives. Yet that justification cannot erase the human cost. The decks of those burning ships were filled with men who bled and burned just as any soldier would. To tell the story truthfully is to acknowledge both the triumph and the tragedy of what Gunn created And then a question: how much of what Gunn achieved was invention, and how much was rediscovery? Skip bombing had appeared before the British had tested versions of it, and low-level strafing had been tried in other theaters. What Gunn did was to refine and integrate these ideas, to turn sporadic experiments into a coherent, standardized doctrine. His genius lay not in conjuring something from nothing, but in recognizing potential others had missed and systematizing it into a repeatable, deadly method. Innovation, after all, is rarely a flash of divine creation. It is recombination of tools, ideas, and courage into something that finally works. Still, the question lingers: was the Strafer truly revolutionary, or was it simply adaptation, the least bad solution for a brutal set of circumstances? In Europe, where Allied air forces eventually ruled the skies and struck at vast, fixed industrial targets, high-altitude precision bombing remained dominant. The Strafer B-25, by contrast, was a creature of its environment, born for the Pacific's wide seas and island supply chains. It was not a universal formula for air warfare. It was a context-specific answer to a specific kind of problem. This raises a deeper issue, one that transcends history. When we call something innovation, are we celebrating genuine improvement or simply applauding survival? In that sense, Gunn belongs to a lineage of unconventional minds. Think of Marine Lieutenant Colonel Evans Carlson, who reshaped guerrilla warfare for his Raider battalions, or Colonel Charles Lindbergh, who taught Corsair pilots to double their range through fuel management. Like them, Gunn embodied a wartime breed of thinkermen who understood that doctrine forged in peacetime, comfort often shatters under combat's pressure. They trusted their instincts, challenged authority, and refused to accept that the book had all the answers. And yet, there is something distinctly American in Gunn's tale: the mechanic-turned-warrior, the improviser who values results over regulations. This archetype runs through America's military history, from frontier ranges discarding rigid European tactics to modern special operations units built on flexibility and initiative. It reflects a national faith in the individual problem solver, the pragmatic tinkerer who believes that if something doesn't work, you fix it yourself. The Strafer B-25 did not win the Pacific War on its own. No weapon ever does. But it reshaped the strategic landscape. By making Japanese maritime logistics untenable, it accelerated the island-hopping campaign that carried Allied forces steadily toward Japan. By late 1944, Japanese commanders had learned to dread daylight convoys through waters patrolled by those wave-skimming bombers. Supplies crept along only at night, slower, smaller, always hunted. Japan's logistical network didn't collapse in a single cataclysmic battle. It bled out through 1,000 precise, merciless strikes delivered by aircraft that, by all logic, shouldn't have been able to do what they did. Paul "Pappy" Gunn survived to see victory. His family, imprisoned for years in Manila, was freed in 1945. He received the Distinguished Service Cross and other honors, though he remained gruff and unassuming about his fame. After the war, he returned to what he knew best, aircraft, until his death in 1957, long before most people truly understood what he had accomplished. Yet his legacy endures. It lives wherever soldiers and engineers face the yawning gap between doctrine and reality, where someone looks at an accepted system and dares to ask, what if we did it differently? The Strafer B-25 stands as proof that innovation doesn't always need laboratories, budgets, or bureaucracies. Sometimes it needs only clear eyes, skilled hands, the courage to question, and the stubborn will to keep shaping, testing, and flying until you finally create something that works. The Japanese Navy learned this lesson not in theory, but in fire. Imagine standing on the bridge of a freighter as the horizon erupts with the roar of engines. A formation of bombers charging so low you can see the faces of the pilots, their goggles glinting in the sun. Those aircraft deliver their bombs not from the safety of altitude, but with the intimate, brutal precision of a point-blank pistol shot. In seconds, calm sea lanes turn into burning graveyards. Supply runs become death sentences. At first, Japanese officers mocked the sight of these ungainly-looking American machines, the B-25s with their solid noses and bristling guns. They called them clumsy, desperate improvisations, the weapons of a nation grasping for luck. But the laughter died as quickly as their ships. Flames replaced mockery. Those desperate bombers became omens of destruction streaking just above the waves, each one carrying the weight of American innovation and vengeance. Because war, in the end, always comes down to two things: will and resources, the will to endure, and the means to keep fighting. Every invention, every tactical shift, every mechanical modification exists to serve one of those purposes: to bolster your side's strength or to erode the enemy's. The Strafer B-25 accomplished both. For Allied pilots, it offered something they'd lacked: a weapon that worked, one that could strike moving ships and strike hard. Confidence soared. Missions that once felt futile became victories. And for the Japanese, each convoy lost meant fewer supplies, fewer reinforcements, fewer chances to survive. Piece by piece, ship by ship, convoy by convoy, Japan's logistical lifeline was severed. The Strafer B-25 didn't just destroy vessels, it shattered the illusion of safety on the sea. So when you walk through a museum and see a B-25 Mitchell sitting quietly under the lights, its fuselage polished, its glass nose gleaming, pause for a moment. Remember that some of those planes fought a very different kind of war. They didn't soar serenely at altitude. They thundered low over the ocean skin. They didn't drop bombs from afar. They charged in close, trading precision instruments for raw aggression. Where others bombed, they brawled. And in doing so, they embodied a timeless truth. Sometimes, victory depends on a single individual who refuses to accept that things must always be done the way they have been. Pappy Gunn looked at a medium bomber and saw a gunship. He looked at high-altitude doctrine and saw the opportunity for low-level devastation. He looked at an enemy convinced of its safety and proved with searing clarity that safety is an illusion when American ingenuity takes flight. That lesson, written in fire across the Pacific, still burns today. The Japanese convoy commanders who watched those modified B-25s appear on the horizon, who saw the muzzle flashes blooming from their noses, who realized too late what was about to happen, they understood in their final moments the cost of underestimating creativity born of necessity. They had believed war followed rules, that combat obeyed doctrine, that the sky itself had limits. Pappy Gunn taught them otherwise, one sinking ship at a time.